I don't know about you, but this whole COVID-19 pandemic, sheltering in place and physical distancing, it's been messing with my ability to keep track of time. Without the regular schedule of work, activities, appointments for children, school schedule, these things that kind of govern the rhythms of life, it seems difficult to figure out sometimes what day it is. This whole season of disruption has made the days feel longer to me, and yet, ironically, the months seem to just fly by. Where did March go? Where did April go? And now, where has May gone? They just seem to fly by so fast. Do you know that we've been doing online church for 13 weeks? That's right, 3 months of church without gathering in buildings. We've been 3 months of living with disruption and uncertainty and waiting to see what's next. And we continue to wait. There are announcements about reopening, and some of that has begun, and this idea of returning to normal, whatever that might look like. But it's clear there's a lot of uncertainty, and nobody knows for sure what's coming next. Some wonder if it's a good idea to reopen. Is it even safe? And many wonder what the new normal is going to be like. These are difficult times to be hopeful, when disappointments seem to be more our experience than anything else. Students may not have been too disappointed when they got an extra week of March break back in March, but now as it's gone on week after week, they're disappointed that they can't be back at school, they can't be with their friends, particularly now this time of year with our grade 8s and our grade 12s and college and university grads, not being able to celebrate these graduation milestones. That's a disappointment for them. Think about spring weddings, many that have been altered dramatically with brides, grooms, and family members disappointed in the big day turning out to be not so big with limited attendance. Vacations and trips have been postponed, and now summer camps have been canceled. Funerals with only a limited number of family members able to attend. These are all disappointing, and it's a difficult time for many. So my question for us today is this. Is it possible to have hope in disappointing times? Yes, I think so. For followers of Jesus Christ, this is an opportunity to cultivate the character of hope. That is biblical hope. Biblical hope is not the same as what the world calls hope. You know, the world's definition of hope, this kind of thin, unsubstantial, fingers crossed, I hope things work out kind of hope. That's not the kind of hope we're talking about. Biblical hope is more solid than that. Biblical hope is anticipation, rooted in the practice of waiting. Not waiting for circumstances to change necessarily, but biblical hope is rooted in waiting on God. The people who wrote the Bible, they went through lots of difficult times. They experienced war and famine and disease and death, uncertainty around the next corner. And it was not rare or unusual for them to experience disappointing and difficult times. The prophets of the Old Testament, they tell people sometimes, hey, things are going to get worse, not better. Not a particularly hopeful announcement. But the prophets still called Israel to hope. To hope not in something as unstable or as uncertain as circumstances, but to hope in that which was unchanging, that which was certain, that which was stable. They were called to hope and to wait on the one true God who had promised to restore and heal his creation. In Psalm 62, we see how David describes this biblical hope as waiting on God. At home, I'm going to ask you to get a Bible if you don't have one yet, maybe on your phone or on the computer or one of those old-fashioned hard copy versions, and look up Psalm 62. I'd like you to follow along in your Bibles as this passage is read to us.
I wait quietly before God, for my victory comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will never be shaken. So many enemies against one man, all of them trying to kill me. To them, I'm just a broken down wall or a tottering fence. They plan to topple me from my high position. They delight in telling lies about me. They praise me to my face, but curse me in their hearts. Let all that I am wait quietly before God, for my hope is in him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will not be shaken. My victory and honor come from God alone. He is my refuge, a rock where no enemy can reach. O my people, trust in him at all times. Pour out your heart to him, for God is our refuge. Common people are as worthless as a puff of wind, and the powerful are not what they appear to be. If you weigh them on the scales together, they are lighter than a breath of air. Don't make your living by extortion, or put your hope in stealing. And if your wealth increases, don't make it the center of your life. God has spoken plainly. I have heard it many, many times. Power, O God, belongs to you. Unfailing love, O Lord, is yours. Surely you repay all people according to what they have done.
David begins this psalm with the decision to wait patiently for God to save him. But notice, this isn't wishful thinking, but instead, David's hope is in God, and he uses word pictures like fortress and rock and refuge to describe the kind of confidence and assurance that brings hope. In verses 3 and 4, David describes his challenges and fears. He has enemies who are wanting to see David fail and fall. His life is like a teetering tower. I envision like those Jenga blocks and that tower of Jenga blocks, and you pull them out and they start to teeter and totter. And David's enemies keeps pulling pieces out of his tower. His life is teetering and tottering on the brink of collapse. Now, you might not feel like you're surrounded by opponents looking for a chance to knock you down or push you over, but maybe the circumstances around you are causing you to feel shaky, nervous, uncertain. Maybe for some, it does feel like life is crumbling apart and important pieces of your life are being scattered all over the place. In verse 4, it sounds like David has some trouble with verbal bullies, accusing him, telling lies about him, slandering him. And perhaps you have felt the bite of gossip or the dull ache of offensive words spoken to you. David knows what it feels like, and he names it here for us. But David contrasts these threats and uncertain circumstances with a God who is steady like a fortress, a firm rock that can't be moved. Biblical hope is based on the character of God and not on personal circumstances. God's past faithfulness is what motivates David's hope for the future. He hopes forward by looking backward through faith. God has faithfully seen David thus far, up to this point in his life. He's been with David. He has stayed with David. He has strengthened David. He has empowered David. And David trusts that God will continue to faithfully see him through the present and into the future. In verses 5 through 7, David says, "Yes, my soul, rest in God," or wait on God, "for my hope comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress, I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge." Comforting words, and yet sometimes they're not so comforting to us because they don't seem to fit with our circumstances. So David goes on to say that if you're having trouble with this idea of waiting on God, of putting your hope in him, of envisioning how to trust him in times of trouble, David says, tell God about it. Tell God about your fears. Tell God about your frustrations. Tell God why you find it hard right now to hope in him. Look at verse 8. David says, "Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge." Notice in between trusting in God and relying on God, there is this invitation to pour out our hearts to him. This is part of what makes the Bible so remarkable. It doesn't play cute with hard issues. It doesn't sugarcoat or tiptoe around difficult realities, but instead directly addresses the hard things in life. The Bible is very honest about suffering and hardship, about disappointment and frustration. If you don't feel that God has been faithful to you in the past, tell him. He can handle it. This pouring out our hearts to God, in the Bible it's called lament. It's not something that we're particularly good at. We're good at complaining, but we're not necessarily good at lament. And we're especially not very good at listening to others in their lament. I know that I'm way too quick, too often, to want to fix and solve or dismiss other people's lament. But lament is biblical. And lament is an honest expression poured out to God of exactly what it is that's bothering you, what it is that you're worried about, what it is that you're disappointed with, what it is that you're hurting over. Lament is casting your cares before God to the one who can actually do something about it. Pouring out your fears and cares before God, even if you can't find the words to express it, just crying out before the Lord, expressing a cry of anguish, a cry of frustration, even a cry of anger, asking God to reveal to you what he is doing, asking God, why is he allowing what's happening, pleading to God for vision to see a hopeful way forward. This is lament. In Lamentations, Jeremiah writes 5 chapters of lament, of crying out before God. But before we leave Psalm 62 and get into Lamentations 3, let me show you one more thing. For David, his hope is grounded in 2 things, and you'll see it in verses 11 and 12. God holds all the power, and God's love never fails. Biblical hope is based on these 2 truths. God holds all the power, and God's love never fails. He is all-powerful, and he is all-loving. This is true, even right now, even during a pandemic, even during loss and grief, even during uncertainty and disruptive change. God is strong enough to do what needs to be done, and God is loving enough to do the right thing. Key truths of biblical hope. Now let's move on and look at Lamentations chapter 3, as this is read to us.
I am the one who has seen the afflictions that come from the rod of the Lord's anger. He has led me into darkness, shutting out all light. He has turned his hand against me again and again all day long. He has made my skin and flesh grow old. He has broken my bones. He has besieged and surrounded me with anguish and distress. He has buried me in a dark place, like those long dead. He has walled me in, and I cannot escape. He has bound me in heavy chains, and though I cry out and shout, he has shut out my prayers. He has blocked my way with a high stone wall. He has made my road crooked. He is hidden like a bear or a lion waiting to attack me. He has dragged me off the path and torn me into pieces, leaving me helpless and devastated. He has drawn his bow and made me the target for his arrows. And he shot his arrows deep into my heart. My own people laugh at me. All day long they sing their mocking songs. He has filled me with bitterness and given me the bitter cup of sorrow to drink. He has made me chew on gravel. He has rolled me in dust. Peace has been stripped away, and I have forgotten what prosperity is. I cry out, my splendor is gone. Everything I hope for from the Lord is lost. The thought of my suffering and homelessness is bitter beyond words. I will never forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. Yet I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning, and I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance, therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who depend on him, to those who search for him. So it is good to wait quietly for salvation from the Lord. And it is good for people to submit at an early age to the yoke of his discipline. Let them sit alone in silence beneath the Lord's demands. Let them lie face down in the dust, for there may be hope at last. Let them turn the other cheek to those who strike them and accept the insults of their enemies. For no one is abandoned by the Lord forever. Though he brings grief, he also shows compassion. For he does not enjoy hurting people or causing them sorrow. If people crush underfoot all the prisoners of the land, if they deprive others of their rights in defiance of the Most High, if they twist justice in courts, doesn't the Lord see all these things? Who can command things to happen without the Lord's permission? Does not the Most High send both calamity and good? Then why should we, mere humans, complain when we are punished for our sin? Instead, let us test and examine our ways. Let us turn back to the Lord. Let us lift our hearts and hands to God in heaven and say, we have sinned and rebelled, and you have not forgotten us. You have engulfed us with your anger, chased us down, and slaughtered us without mercy. You have hidden yourself in a cloud so our prayers cannot reach you. You have discarded us as refuge and garbage among the nations. All our enemies have spoken out against us. We are filled with fear, for we are trapped, devastated, and ruined. Tears stream from my eyes because of the destruction of my people. My tears flow endlessly. They will not stop until the Lord looks down from heaven and sees. My heart is breaking over the fate of all the women of Jerusalem. My enemies, whom I have never harmed, hunted me down like a bird. They threw me into a pit and dropped stones on me. The water rose over my head, and I cried out, "This is the end." But I called on your name, Lord, from deep within the pit. You heard me when I cried, listening to my plea. Hear my cry for help. Yes, you came when I called. You told me, do not fear. Lord, you are my lawyer. Plead my case, for you have redeemed my life. You have seen the wrong they have done to me, Lord. Be my judge and prove me right. You have seen the vengeful plots my enemies have laid against me. Lord, you have heard the vile names they call me. You know all about the plans they have made. My enemies whisper and mutter as they plot against me all day long. Look at them. Whether they sit or stand, I am the object of their mocking songs. Pay them back, Lord, for all the evil they have done. Give them hard and stubborn hearts, and then let your curse fall on them. Chase them down in your anger, destroying them beneath the Lord's heavens.
Lamentations is a profound book, only 5 chapters in length, written by Jeremiah after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonian army and the deportation of the majority of the Israelite nation. The entire book is lament. It is sorrow. It is grief. It is crying out. It goes down into the depths of emotion with vivid word picture, and it doesn't come up for a breath of air, except for a few verses here in the middle of the book in chapter 3. These verses maybe are the only part of Lamentations that you might even recognize, if that at all. But the rest of the book is profoundly bitter lament. Jeremiah is devastated by the destruction of his beloved city. He is heartbroken over the death and deportation of his people. And he is left among the ruins to try and make sense of it all. The city has been destroyed. The temple has been looted. Homes have been demolished. Everything is gone. His whole life is ruined. No matter how bad the impact of this pandemic ends up being, we are likely never going to see the despair that Jeremiah felt and that Jeremiah expressed in the book of Lamentations. The word pictures he uses to describe his sorrow are graphic and bitter. Again, the Bible is surprisingly honest about pain and suffering, frustration and disappointment. But Jeremiah is moved in the middle of his lament to find courage and comfort in biblical hope. Jeremiah looks forward in hope by looking backward in faith. Look at Lamentations 3, verses 20 through 24. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I said to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. Jeremiah, in the midst of the nightmare he is living, chooses to hope. And he places his hope in God's character, which does not change. A hope that endures in hard times. A hope that waits. But while we wait with hope, what do? While we wait, we still have questions. And while we wait in hope, we still have sorrow and tears. Biblical hope is a hope that waits in the tension of our questions and disappointments. And our waiting endures because our hope is in God. In Romans 8, Paul is writing to Christians in Rome and invites them to see their difficult circumstances from a different perspective, to look at their hardships as an expression of the groaning of all creation over a world that is not what it is meant to be. Let's listen to this reading from Romans chapter 8, verses 18 through 25.
Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later. For all creation is waiting eagerly for that future day when God will reveal who his children really are. Against its will, all creation was subjected to God's curse. But with eager hope, the creation looks forward to the day when it will join God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay. For we know that all creation has been groaning, as in the pains of childbirth, right up to the present time. And we believers also groan, even though we have the Holy Spirit within us, as a foretaste of future glory. For we long for our bodies to be released from sin and suffering. We too wait with eager hope for the day when God will give us our full rights as his adopted children, including the new bodies he has promised us. We were given this hope when we were saved. If we already have something, we don't need to hope for it. But if we look forward to something we don't yet have, we must wait patiently and confidently.
This world is not the way it was meant to be. Disease and death were not part of the original plan. Pain, sorrow, frustration, tragedy, not part of God's original design for his creation. These things came into the world as a result of sin. And the world is broken. And Paul says the world groans over this brokenness. Unfortunately, pandemics are part and parcel of living in this broken world. And we've been groaning, searching for healing of this virus and restoration back to what we call normal. The frustration and fear of waiting in line to get into the grocery store, only to wait in line to get out of the grocery store. The annoyance of having to wear a mask, or the annoyance that someone else is not wearing a mask. The daily struggle to keep working if you still have a job, or to keep your kids on track with school and at the same time keep your sanity. All of this difficulty, all of this stress, all of this hardship, not to mention the sorrow and grief of death, of losing loved ones to COVID-19 and not being able to be with them at that point in their life. All of this is part of the world groaning, Paul says, crying out to God, the Creator, to once again make everything right. So what do we do right now? Paul says we wait. We wait with hope. We wait with hope for God to do what God is going to do. We wait with hope for God to bring about what God is going to bring about. We wait with hope for God to restore and make right his creation once again. Paul says we hope for things that we don't see yet. We hope forward by looking backward in faith. We hope in the unchanging character of God, not in uncertain circumstances that can change in an instant. Be clear on this. Biblical hope is not based on circumstances. In fact, often in the Bible, people hoped in the face of outrageous misfortune and difficult circumstances that never got better in their lifetime. They waited on the Lord in light of what God had previously done. God's past faithfulness is what motivated their hope for the future. They hoped forward by remembering backward. This pandemic just very well may be a season of refining that is going to bring great blessing for those of us who learn to hope. Even if our circumstances don't get any better. Even if the second wave of the pandemic is worse than the first, even if there is a sustained global economic depression, even if our comfortable lifestyles are infringed upon even more than they have been so far, even if we have to give up more luxuries and be more limited in our coming and going, even then, can we have hope? Can we look forward by looking backward, seeing and knowing that God is faithful, that God is all-powerful and all-loving, able to bring about all that he has promised in making things right. This is biblical hope. Songwriter Sarah Groves made a big decision a number of years ago, embarking on a bold adventure, stepping out in a new career. Sarah was a school teacher in Minnesota, but she was leaving it behind to sing and to songwrite. And yet, right out of the gate, a devastating financial loss appeared to foreclose on all her dreams. Her new career seemed over before it had even had a chance to begin. And as she sat down at her piano to write a song of disappointment, a song of lament, she felt called to look back on her life. A seed was planted, an invitation was given to look back and see if she could find a time when God was not with her, a time when God had left her and abandoned her alone, and if she could find a time of that to write a song about it. And so she thought back through her life. She thought back through her parents' life. She thought back through her grandparents' life. And a disappointment song became a song of hope and trust in God's faithfulness. Sarah recognized that at the moment she was in the middle of her story. Her story wasn't over. God wasn't finished with her story. I know it is so hard here in the middle of our story to see where this is going when we don't know what's coming next. But hope trusts. Hope looks forward while looking backward and remembering the faithfulness of God in the previous chapters of our story. And so, out of this chapter in Sarah's story, she wrote a song entitled, "He Has Always Been Faithful," inspired by the words of the hymn, "Great is Thy Faithfulness," which in turn was inspired by the words of Lamentations 3. It is a song that Sarah ends every concert with, and the song I want to end this lesson with. I hope you'll be blessed with this song from Sarah, and may you be blessed as you learn to live with biblical hope.
Morning by morning, I wake up to find the power and comfort of God set in mine. Season by season, I watch Him amazed in awe of the mystery of His perfect ways. All I have need of His hands will provide. He's always been faithful to me. I can't remember a trial or pain He did not recycle to bring me gain. I can't remember one single regret in serving God only and trusting His hand. All I have need of His hand will provide. He's always been faithful to me. This is my anthem, this is my song, the theme of the stories I've heard for so long. God has been faithful, He will be again. His loving compassion and knows no end. All His hand will provide. He's always been faithful to me. He's always been faithful to me. He's always been faithful to me.